Hi everyone. I just wanted to do a little presentation on the Unit 6 discussion recap. I just have to say, and I said this in the discussion itself, that I'm super impressed with all of the resources you guys have found, some of which I have actually was not aware of myself. As you can see, there are things that definitely pique your interest in the field, and as you have your own caseloads and they grow, you're going to meet more and more children that just inspire you to want to learn as much about their etiologies and the origin of their disabilities as you possibly can. And you're going to want to know how to best support them. It just comes along with the job. And if you're any kind of wonderful practitioner like I know you'll be, that's definitely what's going to happen. So this is just kind of a taste of what that's like. So we are just going to go over a couple of things here. So coming up, menu assignment number 2 is due on October 7th. And from October 7th to October 14th, our last unit, which is on cultural and linguistic diversity of students and diversity in general, and kind of a recap of the course. You will be able to take your final exam anytime during the week. It is untimed. I will post it in the next module. And yeah, you'll just have access to it. So it includes sort of long-form answers and essay questions that are based on all the materials that we covered in class. And then there's also a couple of case studies. So we'll give you a student and then you'll kind of tell us how you'll best serve their needs. So shouldn't be too stressful. You, of course, are allowed to use any of the materials from the readings. What I don't recommend is just kind of searching and Googling for things and finding answers. I think most of you will have a pretty good grasp on what it is we're doing here. And so I really look forward to those exams. I think you'll do a great job. Just a little something I wanted to bring your attention to, the Association for the Education and Rehabilitation of the Blind and Visually Impaired. That's our professional organization. I've put here a link to their site. And just so you know, the links in this PowerPoint, they all kind of, some of them you're going to have to cut and paste to use, and other ones you can do control click to use, just because I didn't have my act together to put all the links in there for you, to access them the easiest way possible. I apologize for that. There was just a lot, and I wanted to get it to you, soon. So anyways, what's cool about AER is, which is what we call it affectionately, is that, as a student, you, can, join for a discounted rate. I believe it's $95 a year. And with that, you receive a subscription to the journal in our field, which is the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness. So that is a nice way to get some of these resources that we that other folks have been able to find and what we share in the course. There also are different divisions as part of AER, and so there's a rehabilitation division, there's an O&M division. I am on the board for the Neurological Visual Impairment Division, which is brand new, and we are always seeking members. We have about 400 members, and we're always looking for more, and we're really going to try to disseminate research and information about brain-based visual impairments in both childhood and adult populations, and I'm really excited about it. I write our newsletter, and so you have access to all that kind of stuff. You can go online and see, this is the link that goes to the division. So you can kind of see if there's things you're interested in there, and then you can be a part of it. And people have Facebook pages and social media. Some organizations or member divisions do more than others, but you can belong up to 3 for free as a member of AER, and then you'll also get invited to latest updates, news, and research in the field will be delivered to your inbox when you register. So it's a nice thing to belong to, and I do think it's a great idea if you're in the vision field, because it'll keep you up to date on things that are happening. So I just wanted to give that information to you. So we only have 2 weeks to go, guys, so this is it. So this week we're going to talk about, in the module, it's really kind of about services and educational services for students with visual impairment, and I think you'll find that stuff pretty useful as you go along in the field. So a couple of things to note that just kind of came up, and again, very impressed by your conversations and the things that really you brought your attention to here. I think the theme that kind of comes up, and this was very much conversed about in respect to deaf blindness, But it really applies to all students with individuals with visual impairment and with disability in general. And I think you sort of got this this from the Planet of the Blind book as well, and your menu assignments where you're talking to folks with these disabilities and getting to know kind of what their lives are like and listening to their stories. But it's really important to think about the unique experiences of your students and your clients. So remembering that the expectations are that this person is going to achieve everything a person who doesn't have the disability can achieve, but in a different way, and it might just look different for them. But it also is just it is very helpful to consider, to be empathetic and to really put yourself in their shoes. And I think you guys have really stated that you've learned this throughout this course, so I really appreciate it. And I want you to always consider that when you're having a challenging day with students. What is it that I might be doing differently than I have before? What is it that this child might be experiencing differently, especially if they're a student with multiple impairments like deaf blindness? How is this child perceiving and sensing the world right now? And what are the things that I might be able to do differently to make them more comfortable? So always just kind of keep that in mind. I had a good discussion about hand over hand versus hand under hand. Many of you had never heard about hand under hand before. It is definitely a typical experience for adults to want to grab a child's hand and to make them do something. This is actually true with typical children as well, I think I'm learning as I'm a parent. But it's a couple of really useful things came up. So one is that it's just like, it's kind of just not always that you're going to go to this sort of method. For a child with deaf blindness, and with any kind of visual impairment, I think what's really important to understand is that as a teacher of the visually impaired, you're going to have a myriad of assessments at your disposal where you're going to actually assess kind of what is the best approach for the child. And just keep that in mind, that you're not just, you can't just willy-nilly go in there and grab somebody's hand and make them do something. There's a process that you go through as an educator where you're going to figure out what the best presentation is for that child. And that's done through assessments. And you're going to, if you are going to enroll in the 549 course next semester, then I will be with you in that. And we're going to go through that together. So keep that in mind. Sometimes hand over hand, it actually can be fine for a child, but what's important is that you have some way to communicate to the child what it is you're doing. And, there's kind of different schools of thought about it. Some people are like, you never do hand over hand. You only do hand under hand. But I think it really just kind of depends on the kid. You don't ever want to grab a child's hand and shove it towards something. Absolutely not. You cannot just go into it like that without having some kind of communication. So for a student with deaf blindness, once you figure out how they communicate, it's best to have some kind of touch cue to say, hey, this is kind of what we're going to do next, and no matter, what method you're using. And the same thing with a child with a visual impairment who's verbal, some way to communicate, I'm going to take your hand and this is how we're going to explore this. Or I want you to explore it by yourself first, and then if there's anything that you have trouble with, let me help you out. And then it also came up, it's also sometimes children don't have the use of their hands. And so what's another efficient sensory mode that we can access where we're not taking their hand and doing something, but maybe it could be with their feet, or maybe it could be with their sense of smell, and of course their auditory sense. So just understand that we all learn in a lot of different ways, and this is even true when we have limited senses. But it's a great statement to have, and I think the resources that you shared will be definitely useful to understand some of it a little bit better. Another thing that came up was object permanence and deaf blindness, and object permanence is delayed in children with who are blind. And so because we learn object permanence by incidental learning on environment, children with typically developing children, with vision, they see a toy and they want to interact with that toy. They want to go through it. So how do children who are blind learn how to interact with that toy? Well, they hear it, or an adult brings it close to them so that they can find it. So with deaf blindness, you have to remember then that you don't have that auditory sense. You can't hear the noisemaker and go toward it because you don't have hearing. So how else might we present information to children with deaf blindness? Well, we present it to them to hold, or we might make a little board with toys and things that they can explore that's right at their disposal, or we might put it on the side where they have best use of their hand or something like that. So think about all those things, think about the ways in which a typical child or people that kind of develop object permanence, and then what are some strategies that can be used to access those things for other children that maybe don't have their vision or their hearing. And we also had a discussion about cortical versus cerebral visual impairment. So this is my area of expertise, and it's a little bit too complex to get into in this course. overall, I use the term brain-based visual impairment when I'm talking about CVI, or I use the term CVI. We're still having debates about sort of what we call this, who is involved, and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of stay tuned. What's going to be most important for you to understand is that you use 80% of your brain to see, and a lot of the brain is involved. And so we're not always just talking about the cortical region of the brain, but we are most likely talking about the entire brain when we're talking about the visual processing issues of children, as Dr. Lewis stated. So keep that in mind, and just understand that if you have a child that has a neurological issue, then it certainly could be said that they are going to have some sort of visual challenges. Now, whether or not they require services from you is sort of up for debate right now, and it kind of depends on how the child looks, and we will get more into this as we learn about assessment. So, and then building independence. Remember too, there was some talk about sort of like, how do you approach other people who are sort of, giving your students the help that perhaps you would like them to learn things by themselves, and this person is offering assistance, and they don't really realize that they're, being a help or a hindrance, or they're trying to be a help. They might not realize that they're not allowing that independence to grow. And so it's just important for the whole team and people who work around the child, even classified staff, like folks who work in cafeterias and bus drivers and those kind of folks. It's important that they understand what your expectations are. Otherwise, people don't know what they don't know. And you will learn this very soon as working with a teacher that's visually impaired. And so letting the folks know, hey, I'd really try to build independence in Billy during his bus routine. So it would be so awesome if you would just kind of, give him a little space so that he can get up the steps by himself and use his cane. That would be a huge help. And, definitely appreciate any kind of auditory, information you want to give them, but just make sure that, you're keeping it simple, and you're really only giving them kind of specific instructions. So the best way sometimes to just foster this in people is just to give them a little sheet written up, or lead by modeling and say, hey, this is kind of what we're doing. We're trying to build as much independence as possible. Okay. So real quick, just going to go over here. I just wanted to put these all in one place. Haley gave us a great deaf blindness resource, some pretty straightforward stuff from the Columbia Regional Program. I got that on here. Project Salute is great, and also included Deborah Chen and Downing article there from Project Salute, which is a really, really good, great article about tactile strategies. I included the National Center on Deaf Blindness. Those are the folks who run there's a deaf blindness, census that goes on, either every year or every other year, to tell us about how many deafblind students that we have. And that's pretty important information to have for our field. And they also have a bunch of other resources on there, and links to modules and information for parents and teachers, etc. Some more deaf blindness. Micah gave us a nice fact sheet from aadb.org. Also wanted to share with you some stuff from Family Connect about communication symbol systems for children with multiple disabilities, and that's some Millie Smith information, and that is super helpful. Jessica gave us showed some interest in understanding differentiated instruction for math and science, and that's available here at this link to ttaconline.org. Very, very interesting stuff, and very, very helpful. I included a Perkins video by a gentleman named David Brown. David Brown is a wonderful British guy who area of expertise is sort of sensory processing. And you might not be familiar with CHARGE syndrome. CHARGE is an acronym. It stands for sort of the different characteristics of the syndrome. Children with CHARGE tend to be deafblind, or at least have a visual impairment and a hearing impairment as well. So it might be interesting for you to see. You might get a child with CHARGE on your caseload. I've actually had quite a few, although it's a fairly rare syndrome. These videos kind of show, a little bit about sensory processing, and it's just kind of interesting to know, even if you don't have a child with that on your caseload, because it also will apply to other students. Okay, Lynn gave us a ton of information on parents in early childhood, and she also gave us a little explanation of them. So really appreciate, Lynn, you giving us all this great stuff for parents in early childhood. And then there is another Millie Smith reference there. Tommy had some interest in traumatic brain injury in adults, and I do work on this too with the Neurological Visual Impairment Division. We have a lot to learn about from adults because they can actually tell us things more so than children can. They can communicate things better, and so we definitely have to learn from each other, and that's one of my goals in the field. Mental health, very important. Love how that